At a time when so many of us feel like our connections with people are distant and conversations surface level, really engaging with each other takes intention. I'm Ashley Gould, the founder of Attend, an everyday luxury home brand with products that set the table for meaningful spaces and gatherings. Our podcast builds on those spaces through dynamic discussions with open-hearted people, with the goal of sparking conversation around your table. In this series, we explore how designed spaces impact our lived experience and day-to-day life. Our aim is to help you understand what makes a space fulfilling and provide a scientific framework along with expert insights to help you create spaces that enhance your well-being. We delve into the entire spectrum of designed spaces, from our brain's relationship with aesthetics to finding the right designers, lighting systems, and objects that support your well-being. Ultimately, we examine how the spaces we inhabit can enrich our ability to be present and connect with others. Join us.
Welcome to episode 6 of the From Brain to Home series. Our guest this week is Dr. Mariana Figueiro. Mariana is the Mount Sinai Endowed Professor of Light and Health Research at the Department of Population, Health Science, and Policy at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, and the Director of Mount Sinai Light and Health Research Center. Her research focuses on the effects of light on human health, sustainability, circadian photobiology, and lighting for older adults. Dr. Figueiro is the author of more than 140 scientific articles and has brought attention to the significance of light and health as a topic of public interest through her TED Med Talk. You can find Dr. Figueiro's research on the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai's website, which we'll link in our show notes. Enjoy.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to speak with you, Dr. Figueiro. I always like to start to hear a little bit about where you grew up and what kind of kid you were.
I grew up in Brazil, but half coming to the United States because my mother was Cuban, so I would come here every year and spend time here in the United States. But I pretty much grew up outside playing with dogs and kids. It was fun that we would sometimes bring new things from the United States. Like I remember we brought baseball to the neighborhood and nobody knew how to play baseball. So it was kind of fun to do something different. So.
And did you have siblings?
I do. I have a twin brother.
Oh.
And I have an older sister and an older brother.
Oh, a big family.
It's a big family of 4. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I know that you became an architect before you became a light researcher. Can you tell us a little bit about both of those paths?
Yeah. So I did my undergraduate in Brazil. And when you go to college in Brazil, it's a little bit different. You actually have to select your field right when you're 18, and you go through a really big test to get in college. It's a very competitive test, and so you pretty much have to decide what you're going to do at 18, which is really a challenge. It's really hard. So I was between going to civil engineering, business administration, or architecture. It's a funny thing. My older brother he's 3 years older, and he was he was in civil engineering. He said, there's not too many women there. I don't recommend you go there. I'm like, okay, well, if that's not recommended, I really liked more of the math type, physics, but did like the arts a little bit. So I said, all right, then I'll go to architecture. And I was in line to register for the exam. And in line, I made the decision to go for architecture. And the rest is history.
Okay, so you ended up doing well on the architecture test, and you went all the way through that program. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, actually I was a registered architect in Brazil. I'm not anymore. I haven't been there for 30 years. So by now it's lapsed. I wouldn't try to do it anyway because I haven't been practicing architecture for almost 30 years now. But yes, I completed my course. And I also did, as a second degree in the evening, business, because I was so without knowing what I wanted to do. So I did half of the course in business, but didn't complete that, because then I started working, and then, things got busy, and I ended up not finishing it up. But I got a taste of it, which was good.
So you worked as an architect?
I did. I worked as an architect for, right after I graduated, I probably worked for about 3-4 years as an architect. Yeah, I worked in a construction company. So it sounds like I ended up doing everything I wanted, right? Because it was a construction company. I was like, building buildings, and I was the architect there. So it was kind of nice, because there's one thing about what I've always done, and I think it carries through my whole life, is I'm very applied. So, if you ask what I do today, I do much more of the applied research than I do the basic research. So I like to see things happening.
Yeah.
And, working in a construction company, it was really nice to see the buildings going up and see things getting built. And it's always a pleasure for me to see those things coming off the ground and becoming something.
So how did you then decide to become a researcher in the area of light?
We used to joke that your high school council will never tell you, you should do lighting. It's just not going to happen, right? Everybody that works in lighting happens by accident, and I was no different. I came to the U.S. because my ex-husband came for an MBA, and I had the architecture degree, and he went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, RPI, in upstate. And I said, well, I'm going to go to the architecture school, and I want to figure it out if there was a master's in architecture. And they had something called Lighting Research Center. And I'm like, wow, that sounds actually really cool. So last minute I applied for it, and they decided to accept me because they said, we're going to accept you for the first semester, and you have to do well in the first semester, and then we'll decide if you can continue in the master's. And I did well. And that's really where I started in the field of lighting. And interesting enough, I thought I was going to be a lighting designer because of my architecture background. And I started taking a course that was called research design. And I was fascinated by it. And it's interesting because my professor there used to say, research is design. And in a way it is. If you think about it, you have to do experimental design, you have to think about your hypothesis, you have to think about how you're going to analyze the data. It is sort of an art. So I started going more towards the research area. And then once you go to research, you have to get your PhD, or otherwise you just don't move up, right? So that's where I ended up in the science part rather than the architecture part.
And obviously, and we'll get into a lot of the things that you are doing and have done, it obviously stuck. So this passion sort of stayed with you. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, it's one thing. Some people love being in school and studying, but then when they actually apply it, they don't love it as much. It sounds like you have loved it as much. So what is it that I'm sure you've reflected on this over the years. What is it that you love so much about it, or that makes you feel so passionate about it?
Well, especially with the area of light, and I always tell people it is so simple. The principles are so simple, and yet everybody takes it for granted. Nobody even thinks about lighting. And it can make a big difference in people's lives. So what always drives me today is seeing how much of an impact it can have in people's lives in such a simple way. So simple that you don't even think about it. And I think that's the beauty of it. It's not complex, it's not complicated. It's something you have at your disposal every day because you have daylight every day. And it makes such a huge difference in people's lives. That is really, to me, what drives me. It's like, what is the next population that we're going to be able to help? That's really what I like to see it.
Yeah. You gave a really lovely TED Med talk. We'll put it in the show notes that I encourage people to listen to. And you spoke really movingly about losing your mother to liver cancer. And I'm really sorry for your loss. I lost my father to a rare cancer as well about 10 years ago. And you talked about how the time of day of therapeutic dosing could dramatically impact efficacy of therapeutic treatments. Can you explain this to listeners? And then we could talk about how light influences other things that people probably have thought of, obviously sleep, jet lag, things like that. But this was something I had not thought about before and was very intriguing to me.
Yeah, so let me start with what we know from that. We do know there's not as much work as I think there should be, but there is some work that have been done in this area. And it's basically what it's showing, everything in your body goes through this circadian rhythm. So you have peaks and troughs over the course of 24 hours. So does cancer cells, right? There are times of day that they're replicating and there are times of day that they're dormant. So the key thing is when you deliver the treatment at times of days that are more active, you're able to then silence them more effectively. So obviously there are different types of cancer cells will have different patterns of peaks and troughs throughout the day. So you really need to understand how does the cancer works, how does the drug work to be able to do this, what we call chronotherapy. And what you can also do is, because we know that maybe the physicians are not going to deliver the drug at 3 o'clock in the morning just because it's more effective, but you can give the patient the option to change their biological clock with specific light-dark patterns so that even though it's 3 p.m. in the afternoon, their body thinks it's 3 a.m. And it's going to be the most effective. So in a way, it is a power you can give to the patient to be able to basically decide when it's best for them to receive the drug without having to depend on the physician or the clinician or somebody to deliver that drug. And nowadays you have precision medicine. You have pumps that will deliver, so you can program a pump to deliver a treatment at the ideal time. My mother died, it's going to be 24 years now in March. Everybody looked at me like I was crazy when I brought the literature to the oncologist. He looked at me, I'll read it, It's like, I'm not going to listen to this girl. And I mean, could have it made a difference? We don't know. But I think that when you are going through this, anything that you can do, even if it was to reduce the side effects.
Yeah.
I tell you, I think the side effects were worse than the actual cancer. So if you can reduce that, I mean, why not do it? Or at least why not try it?
So I completely agree. And I know doctors can be skeptical for good reason, because I'm sure everybody has ideas about what's going to help. And the best thing that will help them believe it is, double-blind studies, peer-reviewed publications. So what progress have you seen in the last 24 years in that? Because patients obviously need to advocate, but they need to choose what they're advocating for. And physicians need something they can grab onto to say, like, this is worth doing over something else.
I don't think we have as much progress as I would have hoped, but I do think that there are more peer review papers. There's a couple people in England and in France that are actually dedicated to doing these kinds of studies. So we're seeing the needle moving a little bit, and we're seeing a little bit of progress, but I don't think it's enough to be just normal practice, I would say.
Right.
I think it's still in the early stages, not because it's something new, but it's just because there hasn't been enough work devoted to that to show the effectiveness.
Well, in this series, we're talking to a number of professionals, and one of them is Professor Anjan Chatterjee, who's a professor of neuroaesthetics. And he said, and he, like you, likes to do applied research, that it's quite difficult to get funding for the kind of research that he wants to do. And I wonder if that's part of the challenge here as well, that getting the funding to do this is not as mainstream as studying cancer, for example. And so people are less likely to fund it, which means then they're less likely to have the peer-reviewed publications to convince them that it's actually worthwhile.
Yeah, and I think that there's a process, especially with cancer research. You tend to start in animal models, and then you jump into humans. I have somebody I work with that said, the answer to every why question is money. Right? It's where the funding is. It's almost like you have to have somebody that does believe in it, somebody that decides to say, okay, I'm going to make an investment to get it started. And then once you have that, then you have the pilot data you need to start going to federal funding where you can get more of the funding to do the work. But it's absolutely true. It's a catch-22, right? You send this for review and people say, well, you don't have enough data. Well, I don't have enough data because I don't have enough funding. And it just keeps, so you need to have a champion that will fund something novel like that to be able to get the ball rolling, get things in motion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like there are people out there. I don't know how your work gets funded, if it's mostly federally funded or if it's individuals who are passionate about it, or maybe it's a combination. But I would think that the work that you're doing is very much like the work that Professor Chatterjee is doing, where there definitely are people who increasingly will see the benefit. And I do think the more evidence there is, the more people will believe. And I also think, one of the things we talked about with him is, people hear the term neuroaesthetics and then they think, oh, it's just about how something looks. No. This is about how your brain reacts in different environments, in the natural environment, in the built environment, and it dramatically affects your well-being. Fundamentally, like how you feel and what you can accomplish in that environment. And these are things that actually impact every human. So they're so important. So I am so interested in what you're doing and what he's doing, because I feel like people don't grasp the fundamental importance. But I feel like with discussions like this and more articles, whether they're scientific or more mainstream, we can get people more interested and curious, and then hopefully increase the funding to do more research.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's what they say, it's the gene in the environment, right? I mean, you are linked to your environment, and your environment is affecting who you are. And I think a lot of times we just take the environment for granted. We don't really think about, it's what I said about lighting in the TED Med. You flip the switch on, you see, you flipped it off, you don't see, and that's it. That's all you think about. So I think it's very important to create that awareness that the environment will affect who you are, will affect your emotions, your brain, and even your health. And that's what people need to start, I think, paying a little bit more attention to what it means to be in a space and how it affects you.
So let's talk a little bit about that. How would you suggest, and I've listened to a number of the talks that you've given, how would you suggest people pay a little bit more attention? Like if you could see people do one thing in a day, start small, what would it be?
Well, go for a half-hour walk every day after daybreak. That's just a small thing. You get your exercise in, you get your light in. So that's just, But if you think about, I was in Albany last week, it was like -10. So who wants to go outside for a walk at -10? Nobody, right? So you can do something indoors. And I think, what I would do, the first thing is open up the shades. Don't put the shades down during the day in your windows. Sit by a window, face a window. That's just one small thing. Or add more lights around the space where you are. Get more table lamp. If you have one table lamp, have 3. around you. So it's a very simple concept. It's bright days and dark nights. That's what you have to think about. And bright for your biological clock is more than bright for you to be able to see and navigate in the space. So you need higher amounts of light. So if one table lamp around you, you can navigate in the space, that does not mean you're affecting your biological clock. You need more light than that. So think about, tripling the amount of light that you have during the day by bringing lamps, not necessarily, bare bulbs, that I don't recommend, but, comfortable table lamps that are close to you to increase the amount of light that you have around you.
Yeah, one of the things you talked about in one of your talks was thinking outside of the ceiling. So we turn on the lights, we see the lights in the ceiling. And you talked about layering lights. And I also see the benefit of that as you get into evening time, and you could maybe turn off the overhead lights and turn on all of your table lamps, and you could sort of start slowly reducing the light that way.
Correct. So in other words, if you try to get everything out of the ceiling, you're not going to do a good job at that. First of all, you're going to need an electrician to try to change your ceiling lights. So that makes it harder. If you have table lamps and floor lamps and things you can put around you, you actually are getting that light in a passive way. And that's the other very important thing. Light, you have to be in an environment that you're receiving that bright day and dark night in a passive way. A lot of times people are using light boxes. I'm sure you heard about light boxes for seasonal depression. Those are really, really bright, big light boxes that you have to sit in front of them for 45 minutes, an hour. It's an effort.
Yeah.
And you don't want that. You want your environment to naturally and passively be delivering you those bright days and dark nights. And it's very important to reduce the amount of light in the evening, just as important it is to increase the amount of light during the daytime.
So everybody now, I feel like the thing people talk about with light is sleep. I mean, depression and other things, but sleep is probably the number one thing. So do you sleep well?
I do. I've always been. Interesting enough, before the pandemic, I would go to bed at 8 o'clock at night and wake up at 4 in the morning every single day,
Wow.
Summer, winter. Sometimes I would go to bed with the sun out at 8 o'clock at night. But I was so regular, and so my sleep was just a blessing. I don't know, after the pandemic, or I don't want to admit, it could be age. I can fall asleep, but then I'm up at 3 in the morning, and I'm trying to resolve this. And I think this is more of an age issue than anything else. I don't have insomnia. I don't have problems falling asleep. I can really do that. And a lot of times I attribute to, I do pay attention to the light I get, especially during the daytime. I want to be out as much as I can. I'm sitting here while talking to you. I have a lamp that it's right in front of me, that it's the table lamp that we're using for long COVID. We're running a clinical trial with the NIH of people that have long COVID and can't sleep. And one of the clinical studies that we're doing is looking at the combination of light and melatonin. And I'm sort of the national PI of that clinical trial. So we found the lamp, gave them the specifications, and we are now working with each of the participants. We're recruiting 600 participants, and we are, in each participant, doing the lighting installation over Zoom in their homes, and they're receiving that for 8 weeks, and we're measuring, outcomes, sleep, and a bunch of other outcomes. And I'm sitting here in front of that lamp because otherwise I would be probably in a dark room or darker room. And that's what I do. I make sure I have my light during the day. And that, honestly, it helps me not just with sleep, but it helps me stay awake during the day. It's like, the other thing that I say about light is like a cup of coffee. It gives you this alerting effect, that it's a very instant effect. If you're in a dark room all day, you're going to be tired.
Yeah.
Even if you had a good night's sleep, you're still going to be tired. So it has various facets, and there's just huge benefits of getting good light during the day, being able to sleep better at night, and then everything else falls into place.
So I talked with Dr. Chatterjee about a few things, and you're doing some similar work. One is working in hospitals or healthcare facilities. You were talking about a couple of years ago, potentially working with some prisons. I don't know if you did that or not. And then the other area that I think you talked about was like long-term care facilities. So where older adults are living. I would love to hear about what you're doing in studies in these areas. One of the things that Dr. Chatterjee has found, and he's in the process of doing a study right now in a mental health facility where they've created these rooms, and it has biophilic design. So a lot of natural, like greens, like green tile on the ceiling and lighting and physical plants and things like that. I feel like the combination of what both of you are doing is so amazing. And I think you're trying to get to some of the same places, which is how can we study the effect, in your case, of lighting in these areas and the positive or negative effect that it's having, and then obviously optimize for the positive effect going forward. So we'd love to hear about any of those studies that you've done.
Yeah, one area that we have most of the studies that we have published, and we now are, I would say, half or 60% of our funding is in this area, is on mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease. And that is a combination of at home and in more controlled environments, assisted living facilities, nursing homes. And what we're seeing is one of the main problems, especially when a person has Alzheimer's disease, is this lack of consolidated sleep. So they're awake for 2 hours, asleep for 3 hours, awake again for 4 hours, and it's just impossible for the caregiver. That's really one of the main reasons why people are institutionalized, is because the caregivers can't care for them this way. So what we show is that if you give them this bright day, dark nights, and all we did is we added table lamps, floor lamps, light tables. We developed all these different ways of delivering the light in a passive way, because that's the important thing. Is just with Alzheimer's patients, you can't force them to do something. You need to adapt to their environment, and that's what we did with our lighting. And we're seeing a very, very strong positive impact on sleep. So they're consolidated their sleep, and they're sleeping better at night. There's a strong effect on depression. It's very interesting how depression keeps popping up as a very, very strong positive outcome that we're seeing. And we're starting to see an improvement in cognition. Some of the studies we're doing cognitive tests, and we're seeing an improvement in cognition. So are we curing Alzheimer's or mild cognitive impairment? No, we're not. But we are curing one of the worst symptoms, which is that, sleep, lack of sleep consolidation, and then the negative effects of not sleeping well. So that's one area that I think, if you ask me, I don't understand why we don't have that in every nursing home, every assisted living facilities. It should be standard. It should be, in my view, it should be policy to have better lighting in these places. So that's one area that we've been working, and we are seeing, and we continue to collect data. So there's more to come.
Do you have papers that you could give us that we could put in the show notes?
Yeah, we have papers published. We have a lot of papers, so I definitely can share with you all that.
And how many hours of that more concentrated light have you seen? Like there's a specific amount or number of hours?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the way we started and all the papers that we have published so far has been all day in the sense from the time they get up until 6 p.m. in the evening. Now, we don't force them or we don't tell them they have to stay there all day.
Right.
But we put the lights in places where they mostly spend their time.
Okay.
Because if you go to nursing homes, what they do is they just put people in the same room all day. It's easier to care for them, right?
Yeah.
So one of the most successful ways that we had to deliver the light was a light table. We literally had a 70-inch TV that we turned into a light table. And because these participants, these patients, they sit down, they look down, and that's when you get the light at the eye, because you need to have that light at the eye. So we have been, I think the success of our work has been tailoring that light to the activity of the participants. Now we are finishing up a study, which we're going to complete data collection in another month, where we are comparing doses, 2 hours, 4 hours, and all day.
Okay.
Because we want to see if there is a difference. From my experience, if you do a couple of hours a day, you should be good. You should be enough to synchronize your biological clock to your watch through the time, and then maintain that regular light-dark pattern / sleep-wake cycle.
Yeah. Okay. Fascinating. So did you end up doing work in prisons?
Yes, we are in the midst of doing it. We unfortunately had to put a stop on the project because there were some technical issues with the installation.
Okay.
So, lighting should be simple, but I think people make it complicated, and basically the control system is not working, and they have the lights on at 10 o'clock at night until 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, which is not what's supposed to be doing. So we had to stop data collection until those technical issues are resolved, but we are planning on collecting some data there as well. And honestly, with prisons, I expect to have exactly the same impact that we had with nursing homes, because it's not much different.
Well, the difference I would think is that lights might be on all the time for safety or security, which could affect the circadian rhythm, both of inmates and of people who work there.
Yeah, but in nursing homes, they do have lights on 24 hours too, because you have the nursing staff. You have safety because some of these patients are wandering around. It's interesting because we see the strongest effect of this light-dark pattern when you have controlled environments. So whether it's prison or hospital rooms, which we're also working with cancer patients in hospital rooms, those are spaces that you can give bright days and dark nights. So we're very uneven in our light exposure. But people that are in controlled environments, it's almost like a no-brainer. You can deliver that robust light-dark pattern very easily because you know where they're going to be during the day and at night.
Well, what about for night shift workers, whether they're healthcare workers or whatever? Their circadian rhythm is obviously off. Are they supposed to just completely do a 180, have their nights light and their days dark?
When do you spend the most time with the people you love? For us, it's at home, around the dinner table with family, or sipping cocktails in the living room with friends. So why not make that time even more meaningful by imbuing your gatherings with pieces that not only make connecting easier, but spark conversation around your table? Amaton's collection of small batch, artisan, quality-made pieces for tabletop and home are not only made for simple serving, they're works of art designed for daily use. Whether you're hosting a dinner party or sitting down for family game night, our collections create a sense of presence and peace in every home. Shop our collection of dinnerware, drinkware, serveware, and more at amatond.com. That's AMEATENDRE.com. Gather by design.
Well, if they are permanent shift workers, so they're permanently night shift, you have a good argument to do that, right? This is very hard to accomplish. And the reason why it's very hard to accomplish is you have a big light source during the day, and it's called the sun.
Yeah.
And the minute you get out of your shift at 7 o'clock in the morning and you get sunlight or daylight, you are entrained to that light, which means you're a daytime person. So it's very hard for you to switch and become a completely night owl. The second thing is typically shift workers, they tend to be on and off the shift. They have families. They have kids. They want to be with their friends. They want to be able to have a meal with their families. So even though biologically speaking, it would be a good thing, practically speaking, it's very hard to accomplish. Very, very hard. So there are a few solutions that people have tried, and we also have tried, and we're currently actually trying some new ideas. There are two options. One solution that was Charmaine Eastman. She used to be at Rush University. I think she's retired by now, but Charmaine did a lot of work with shift workers. Her proposal was, why don't we make them night owls? So in other words, we delay them so that they want to fall asleep at 3 o'clock in the morning. So if you want to fall asleep at 3 o'clock in the morning, you can stay awake for another couple of hours and it's fine, because it's like if your bedtime is at 10, but you want to watch a show and you stay up till midnight, you can handle that.
Yeah.
So she worked a little bit trying to do that. She had some success in the lab, but again, she said it only works for those who work 7 days on that schedule. And then the second option is, we have been working with that. It's giving them light like a cup of coffee. So light that will alert them without phase shifting or without messing up their biological clock. So they continue to be daytime people, struggling to be awake at night, and we're helping them get through the night. And we're using red light. That's one of the things that we have been working with. And the reason why we're using red light is because red light has a very strong alerting effect. And that could be because of color red may mean something to the brain and you react. So they are reacting faster. They have brain activities showing that they're getting more alert. They feel less sleepy. All of these suggesting that there's this fight and flight system that wakes them up in a way when they get the red light. And the red light does not impact the biological clock, does not impact their melatonin level. So melatonin is a hormone we produce at night and in darkness. And suppression of melatonin by light at night does alert a person at night, but it's also being linked to a series of maladies long term. So you don't want to suppress your melatonin at night. Having high melatonin at night is important even for shift workers. So that's why we were so excited about the red light showing that alerting effect, because it's like drinking a cup of coffee at night, keeping you alert without messing with your biological clock.
So how do you deliver the red light? I mean, I've heard of red light therapy, and I've heard of people having red lights like in saunas. I'm not sure why, but how do you deliver it, and how, like, for whom is it good other than shift workers?
The mechanisms are different than what people are doing for the saunas and, the red light mask and all that. That one is more on the very long wavelength, sometimes even in the IR, and people claim that it helps with wound healing. Some people claim it helps the skin and so on. It's not that. It is red. It looks red. It's saturated red. And we think the way it's affecting more of your sympathetic system or your flight and fight system. So parts of the brain that are linked to, in a way, survival. It's almost like when you have a police car chasing you, you went through a stop sign, a police car chasing you, your heart rate goes up, you start sweating. We think it's the same mechanism that red light is doing. The way we're implementing that, and we've done it in 2 projects. One project was with nurses, and all we did is we created like goggles, and we would give them half an hour 3 times a shift. So it's almost like a cup of coffee. The other way was, it's a project we did with the Metro Istanbul. It was in Istanbul, and it was they were train operators. So they were looking at screens in a very dark room, 24 hours, just looking at trains around Istanbul. I don't know if you've ever been in Istanbul, but the trains and the cars, And in the metros, it seems like everything goes on top of each other, and you don't know how they don't hit each other, and they don't hit a passenger on the street. It's just like chaos. And they are the ones sort of monitoring the chaos, basically. Okay. So what we did there is, because they liked low light levels, because they are looking at screens. So the notion is that if you put too bright light in the environment, that it would affect their visibility of the screens. So we had the lower light levels, the white light, lower light levels, and then we added a strip of the saturated red. So it kind of mixed up. I have some pictures that we took, and it looks actually pretty interesting. So it's almost like this muted red. Yeah. And we did see an improvement in their sleep.
Interesting.
Because we now were able to give them the right light and not mess up their circadian clock during the nighttime environment. And then you asked me what other application other than the shift work. We did a small study with General Service Administration with federal workers working during the day. We gave them blue light in the morning, because the blue light in the morning helps synchronize the circadian system. If you're in a dark cave without any external cues, you're going to continue to have circadian rhythms, but they're going to run in humans with a period slightly longer than 24 hours. Okay. It's about 24.2 hours. So morning light is very important, because what it does, it resets your biological clock so that it runs with 24 rather than 24.2 hours. So you're in sync with your watch. Yeah. So that's why morning light is so important. And you are most sensitive to blue light for resetting the biological clock. That's why red doesn't affect the biological clock. It's really blue. It's the other end of the spectrum that affects the biological clock. So the way we did it with GSA was, in the morning, we were giving them this blue light. Okay. And then in the afternoon, we changed it to the red light, because one of the times of the days that we saw a very strong impact of this red light was during the post-lunch dip. So, we all have that post-lunch dip, that sort of dip in the afternoon, which we think it's because of eating, but it really isn't. It really has to do with how, our biological clock interact with sleep homeostasis and so on. But that red light was very good at minimizing that. And we showed in the field that by giving them this morning blue light to synchronize the biological clock, and then the afternoon red light, that they were sleeping better, they were more alert and feeling less sleepy and more vital in the afternoon with the red light.
Do you ever follow up, whether it's with the workers in Istanbul or this study, and see if the people are continuing the interventions that you suggested?
In Istanbul, I think they are. I haven't followed up. And in fact, I worked with a student of mine. He worked at the Metro Istanbul, and he arranged for that project to occur. But then he left there and he came back to the United States. So I never really followed. But I think they're still doing it, because this was a permanent installation. The other ones were not. The other ones were either the goggles, or we just built some fixtures and put it in people's spaces, and then we removed it. So I don't think they are following. But that's one of the frustrations I have, is that there is no fixtures or products that people can actually go out and buy. When we did the study with General Service Administration, they asked us, where can I buy this? I want to buy this for my office, for my cubicle. And I'm like, now we're starting to see, like, we finally found that table lamp that we're using for the Recover study, that's a commercial product. So we're starting to see more of those. But a lot of what the manufacturers do, they try to do things in the ceiling. Yeah. They try to sell products that are, high margin, a lot of it offices, and things that you can go out and buy. They're not as available as I wish they were.
Well, it seems like an area that's ripe for innovation. So my husband wears blue blockers at night, which makes sense now that you're saying you want blue light in the morning, so you want to block the blue light at night. And I'm starting to hear about red light more, although maybe it's more like people are wearing the masks. And I also remember we got some glasses. They're like orange. They're so unattractive. So it's like, you need to have something that's like you can actually wear or use every day, and it's easy, and it does feel like an area that's ripe for innovation. And on the other hand, I'm always skeptical, like, what is the research behind this? Is it really scientifically efficacious? So it feels like somebody like you should start a company, like somebody who's really studying it and really understands, or maybe one of your students or something. But it shouldn't be that hard, should it?
It shouldn't. It should. You know, my problem with starting a company and so on is I like the research too much, and I want to continue to be independent. I don't want, because then people say, well, she's really saying that because she's trying to sell her product.
Right.
And so for me, it's like I'd rather not sell the product, but I wish somebody would do it. I mean, it's a startup that's actually not working with us. I'm just helping them, and hopefully one day will work when they get funded, because they don't have funding right now. But they actually develop an app in the iPad that increases the brightness of the iPad. So now you can deliver the light while you're actually using your iPad. I think this is a really, really good idea, because now you talk about passive, right? And how many hours can we spend in front of an iPad? And then it has sort of a frame that goes green or red depending on whether you're actually receiving the correct amount of light. Because we have sort of a model that basically calculates how much circadian effective light you need. And they're using that to show that, yes, you are now getting that amount of light, and it gives you how long you're getting it. So it gives you an idea of the dose that you're getting. So I think I love that concept, and that's why I've been helping them, because I think it's a great idea. You think about kids, you think about, even Alzheimer's patients, they could be playing with some activities on an iPad.
Yeah.
So, I'm doing what I can. We work with some manufacturers to try to help them with what they need to do to develop. And so we're making progress. It's not like all is lost, but, slower than I would have liked.
Let's talk about screens for a second. So yes, I completely understand during the day people are on iPads or computers, which could be a great way to get them the right kind of light. But we're also told in the evening, like 2 hours at least before bed, we shouldn't be looking at our phones. We shouldn't probably be watching TV. And yet people are. Do you think that there will be, could they do the opposite? Could they create an app for your phone or your iPad or the TV that lowers a certain kind of light at night?
Yeah, there are some apps. Even Apple created the night shift mode. The night shift mode is partially good in the sense that they change the color from blue to yellow, which helps. But if you don't change the brightness, you don't completely solve the problem. It's a combination of amount and color, and amount matters more than the color. So it's better for you to reduce the brightness than to change the color. Some of the softwares that are out there, they tend to reduce a little bit of the brightness and change the color. The problem is that once you change the color and reduce the brightness, it becomes very hard to even see what you're doing in the iPad, right? So I always tell people, why don't you just turn it off? Because it's like, what's the point, right? Turn it off. Or get something like a Kindle or things that don't necessarily emit light.
Yeah.
That it's less. It is also about dose, right? So you can do for half an hour, and it's probably not going to be as consequential as if you're doing it for 3 hours before you go to bed. So everything in moderation helps too. Yeah. So you can check your email for 15 minutes, and it should be okay.
Yeah.
But for it to be really effective, you are losing a lot of the fidelity of the screen and what you're trying to see. So
yeah,
it's a compromise.
I was just trying to think about what will people actually do, because people they're at work all day. They're going to want to watch a show at night. It's like people are humans and
Yeah.
they're,
TV is fine. We did a
okay.
study. And even though the TV looks very bright, because you're so far away from the TV, it reduces the amount of light getting at the eye.
Interesting. Okay.
So, it's the inverse square law. So the farther you are, the less amount reaches that the eye of any surface, right? So the TV is actually good because it's, you're far away from it and it's not that effective. But I always tell people, if you are watching a horror movie, it's going to alert you and you're going to have trouble falling asleep. So it solves part of it, but not everything.
Well,
right?
I'm reading East of Eden by Steinbeck right now. And last night I couldn't sleep because it was a really difficult chapter and it was in my head.
So light is only part of it. You can do some of it, but you can't do it all.
No, but we should do what we can that's easy to improve our chances at getting good sleep, being alert during the day, hopefully reducing the effects of Alzheimer's or cognitive impairment. I mean, all of these things are worth doing.
They're not going to solve everything, but it's a good change in your behavior that will definitely help. And if you do it every day, that's the other thing about circadian system and about us humans. It's regularity. You want to do it every day at the same time. That's the problem, for example, of shift work.
Yeah.
That they're not regular, right? They're 3 days on, 2 days off, 4 days on, 4 days off. It's not regular. And that lack of regularity is also not very healthy.
Well, and I've heard that too more recently, that you should wake up the same time on the weekends as you do during the week. And just listening to you talk, it's like, okay, well, we need to get that blue light at the same time every day. We need to keep our circadian rhythm every day on the same. So it makes a lot of sense.
We joke that teenagers are so hard, right? Because they tend to go to bed very late. They don't want to get out of bed and so on. And then people keep asking me, what do we do about teenagers? What do we do about teenagers? Because getting them out of bed to get the light in the morning is hard. And I said, I'll tell you what, give them a puppy. Because they're going to have to wake up every day with a puppy, take them to walk, and go outdoors and get the light. So I think that's probably the best. It's almost like give them something that will keep them on a regular schedule, getting that light every day at the same time. And then it becomes easy because they're going to readjust to it, and that will become the norm.
Yeah. What about jet lag? You talked about jet lag, I think, in one of your talks. It affects me very deeply. Like if I travel and I try all the things like if you get there in the morning, stay up until it's nighttime or whatever. But are there any tips or tricks you have?
Jet lag, I think the key thing about jet lag is that people think that they're going to solve the problem on the flight in one day. And your biological clock is slow.
Yeah.
It's slow to move, which is a good thing because you don't want a cloud to come in the sky and fool your biological clock into thinking it's nighttime just because it got a little bit darker. So you need to have this resistance to changes or else you'll be thoroughly confused. But that is a problem when you travel multiple time zones. You want to minimize as much light as you can when you arrive because it's the wrong time that you're getting the light. And then, yes, stay awake and try to fall asleep at night at the local time night. That will help a little bit. But honestly, it takes days, and some people cope with it better than others. But, one of the things that it's very interesting, I've been to Sweden during the summer months and during the winter months. And I can tell you, during the summer months, going outdoors, that's the best thing you can do because that's where you get most of the light that will help you resynchronize to the local time. During the summer, in 3 days, I was fine. During the winter months, I was there for a week. I could not re-entrain to the time because the light indoors were extremely low.
Yeah.
There was no light outdoors, not while I was awake at least. My body just couldn't resynchronize. So one other tip is really get outside a lot and try to because that's the best light to help you resynchronize. Like I said, it's a blessing when you have jet lag. It's a problem when you are shift work, that you go outside every morning and it messes you up because it keeps you on that daytime schedule every day. But daylight is the best light source we have.
I've heard people say for jet lag, like weeks before you go, they have apps where it can say like, okay, go to bed now.
If you want to do that, you have to start a week before. And you can, but then what do you do with your life here a week before? You go on vacation to go on vacation? I mean, it's hard. There's just not a lot of solutions in a way for jet lag, other than my solution is really, if you go outdoors in the local time, that's where you want to do.
Yeah.
So you minimize, like going to Europe, minimize the morning light, stay awake, go to bed, then wake up, and that's when you start just being part of their light-dark cycle to help you as much as possible.
Do we understand at all why some people are more affected than others by jet lag?
No, I mean, people have done some work looking at the biological clock. There was a paper actually saying that we have a break in the biological clock. There's so many hours we can phase shift a day, right? So there is this basically, you can't completely phase shift 12 hours in one day. It's just your biological clock's just not going to let it do it.
Right.
So I think there's a genetic component of people that are more malleable and more acceptable. For example, a lot of people can't do shift work. They just can't. And other people don't have a problem doing shift work. They can adapt. So I think it's more of a genetic than anything else. I don't think it's an environmental thing. I think it's genetic.
How do aging eyes respond differently to light compared to younger eyes? And what implications, if we do understand this at all, would this have for designing spaces differently for different populations?
Yeah, well, as we age, a lot of changes happen, first of all, to our eyes. We receive less light in the back of the eyes. We tend to have smaller pupils, which again reduces the amount of light reaching the back of the eyes. We tend to scatter more light, so we're more sensitive to glare. So all of the negative things that occur in the front and in the back of the eye result in less light getting to the biological clock. So basically, we need higher amounts of light to see. We need higher amounts of light to respond to for our biological clock. So that's sort of the quantity side. And then we have, obviously, your biological clock ages, and then it starts breaking down the communication between your biological clock and the rest of your body, because we have the master clock in the brain. And then we have a lot of what we call peripheral or slave oscillators. So liver, pancreas, stomach, everything, all of your organs have clocks. And these clocks, these biological clocks, they sync up to your master clock. So you lose that connection. So you start having internal desynchrony. And in a way, jet lag is that. It's like your liver takes longer to resynchronize than your master clock. So it's all out of sync. You're not hungry at the time you have to be hungry. So you lose that ability to synchronize. As you get older, it gets worse. One of the things that we have shown very clearly is that increasing that amount of light, so basically it's giving even more robust light-dark patterns, is what's helping older adults. The second thing with older adults is the synchrony. It's very important to maintain them regular because that helps them. It's almost like it's a feedback in a way, and it helps them. So I think aging in place, the other area that we have been working with is falls. You definitely have an increased risk for falls. And it's interesting because your perceptual system that helps you with postural control and stability receives a lot of the information from your visual system. It relies on your visual system. So you need to know what's horizontal, what's vertical in the space. Well, now you don't have such a good visual system, so you lose that. So we have developed a horizontal vertical lights that go around door frames in bathrooms, for example, as night lights. So what that does, first of all, it helps you direct where you have to go when you wake up at night. And it also gives you this perceptual cue that reinforces sort of for you to orient yourself in the environment. And we've shown that there's a 34% reduction in falls with those night lights in nursing homes. So we are actually increasing the sample size of the study we did. It was about, I can't remember how many participants, 60 participants. We're now doing a 300 participant study with the University of North Carolina, trying to replicate those studies in nursing homes.
That is so cool. I love that. Sometimes a small change can have a big effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do natural and artificial light differ in architectural spaces? How can architects, coming back to your work as an architect, how can architects and designers optimize both for physical and mental health of occupants using both natural and artificial light? I heard you talk in one of your talks about, somebody was talking about,
Skylights?
Yeah, skylights. So I don't know. I'm just interested in, some buildings, it's all going to be artificial. Some is hopefully going to be more of a mixture. What is optimal? What do you want to see? What would you like architects and designers to be considering as they're designing these spaces?
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, bringing daylight into space, it's perfect. It's a great light source for the circadian system. It's a great light source for visibility. I mean, it's perfect. However, daylight is not brought into the space as perfectly as we would like to. So if you have a window, you have a west side window, a south window, you're going to get sun. And people will get out of their chairs and pull the shades if there's sun hitting their eyes or their face or their work plane or their screen. The way to bring the daylight is, how do you bring more diffuse daylight? And that's why I talk about skylights. You can't have skylights in every floor of a building. Right. But if you're talking about nursing homes or assisted living facilities, these tend to be a one-floor facility. Those are the places where you want to consider that, because it does give that diffuse light that you need. For the electric lighting, you're always going to need to supplement the day lighting with the electric lighting, because you have winter months in higher latitudes that you're not going to have enough daylight. You have cloudy days, you have things that are, people will pull the shades if they're windows. So you have to always count on that supplemental electric lighting.
Yeah.
And what I think it should be passive. It should be, try to have more indirect lights, because they're easier on the eyes than just, very bright things coming from the ceiling. Reflect things off of surfaces. So you want to minimize having dark green walls in ceilings, because your space is going to be dark. So you want to have light colors in the environment. And like I said before, use layers. You want to have layers of light that will allow you to bring the light source closer and turn them on and off at the right times of day and evening, because you need to have that flexibility of different layers that you can turn on and off as needed.
Definitely. I have 5 questions I like to ask everybody at the end of every episode. But before I do that, what have I not asked you that you want to share, that you think is a common misconception, that you want people to know, that anything at all?
I do want to say that lighting is almost like a forgotten gem or something, you know what I mean? So I just want people to start thinking more about how they change their behavior, how they change their environment to get more light during the day and minimize that light exposure at night. Yeah. I think it's just such a simple solution that makes such a huge impact that, if I can make people think about lighting a little bit more, that's what I would like to see.
And one final lighting question. If you had the funding to do any study, what would it be?
I think I would definitely like to do the study of the chronotherapy and try to find easy solutions for that to be implemented.
Yeah.
I really think that's an area that it's understudied and underfunded. So that would be a new area that I would like to start.
Okay, if anyone listening wants to fund that.
We're ready to go.
As we explore in my brand, Amatand, which means to take care of your soul in French, objects can hold a lot of meaning for us, and they can tie us to the past, enable us to be in the present more, or even take us into the future. Can you share an object from your life, whether you still have it or not, that holds a lot of meaning for you, and tell us why?
Unfortunately, it's something I inherited from my mother, and it's probably a habit that I have. I love jewelry. And, I'm addicted to jewelry. And my mother was like that. And I have one special piece of jewelry. It's a pair of earrings. And I went to visit her in Brazil, before she died, of course. And she was wearing these earrings. I said, "Oh, Mom," because we would go out buy jewelry every time I was there. We would go to a jewelry store and buy. And I said, "Well, Mom, that's pretty earrings." I hadn't seen it. She bought it when I wasn't there. And she just took them out, gave it to me. And it was like, every time I wear, I remember that day. So that's a really, really, it was just so natural. She just unhook it and just gave it to me. Here, yours, take it.
That's
so I have it till today.
My stepfather's mother made jewelry, and so I have some pieces that she made, and I feel the same way when I wear them. I have this connection to her. It's so wonderful. Can you share a favorite tradition? Maybe it's jewelry shopping. It could be something from when you were a child or something you do today. It could be around a place you go or food you eat or anything at all.
Yeah, I think I have one from the past, which we used to come every July. My grandfather, which is my mother's father, who lived here after they moved out of Cuba, and he would bring the entire family to Key Biscayne. So he would rent a little house there, and the entire family would spend the month of July there. And no matter what happened to the world, every July we were there. And I have fond memories of, going to the beach and doing things with my cousins there. And so those were very, very good. It was a good tradition and a good sort of good thing. And today I still have one tradition that I love. I don't know for how much longer I'm going to have it, but my dad still lives in Brazil. I call him every Sunday. Every Sunday, no matter what happens, I call him. If I don't call him, he gets mad, but he's like, "Why didn't you call me last weekend?" And unless I tell him, "Hey, I'm going to be in China and I can't call you," but I'll let him know. It's sort of a tradition we have that he expects and I expect, and it's nice. We just talk.
That is a wonderful tradition. Are you in a phase in your life where you enjoy entertaining in your home?
No. And the reason why I don't do it is I have two homes right now. I have one upstate near Albany where I used to work, and then I have an apartment in Manhattan, and I go back and forth. So I sometimes don't even know what home is. When I am home, I just want to be home, just outside the world. That's my sort of heaven. So I haven't been entertaining much at all.
Have you in the past?
I had. When I was married, I used to do that. Used to have dinners for families and so on. But it's interesting. My twin brother loves to entertain. So every birthday, everything was always in his house, always him entertaining. And I was just like, okay, I can do that. I don't have to worry about it. So I'm not much of an entertainer.
Well, it sounds like you find ways to be with friends and family.
Yeah.
It's just not maybe in your own home.
That's right. That's right.
Do you have one or two top resources, books, podcasts, websites that you can recommend? It doesn't have to be about light, but it could be, or just anything else that you are passionate about.
I have one book that I got from my mentor when I was in the research design class. It's called The Art of Scientific Investigation, William Beveridge, and it's a great book. It brings a human touch to research, to scientific investigation. Anybody starting in this area, trying to become a scientist and do scientific investigation, I highly recommend that.
And what about for lay people? So I'm not a scientist, but I'm interested still.
Yeah, this is a good book for lay people. That's
Okay.
really it's almost like a entry level book. It's just you just fall in love. You understand why you're falling in love with this area.
Okay.
It's a really good book.
Perfect. And last question, what do you do for yourself? Maybe it's morning walks. Do you have a practice, a focus, a habit, or daily routine that contributes to your success or just your well-being?
I exercise every day. I have a great cup of coffee every morning. I can't do it without it. I enjoy coffee. I mean, being Brazilian, you gotta love coffee. You gotta love good coffee. I don't like crappy coffee. But yes, I wake up. I'm very, very, very regular. And I love to travel when I can. To me, traveling it's just opening up the world. It's just walking in different cities, and I don't have to do a lot of museums. I don't have to do any. I just like to walk in different places and see different cultures. So whenever I can, I travel.
Amazing. Well, it has been so wonderful talking with you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Very nice talking to you.
Thanks for listening to an episode of On the Table with Ashley. Subscribing to, rating, and reviewing our podcast helps us to continue to record great interviews. So please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're interested in learning more about the products we talked about on the show, visit amattand.com. That's AMEATENDRE.com to check them out. When you become a member by sharing your email on our website, we'll share special discounts that relate to products discussed on each episode. Finally, email us at reachoutanytime@amattand.com with thoughts you have or ideas for topics or guests for future episodes. Thanks for listening.